Hello, everyone. Welcome to Doctors Making a Difference. I'm your host, Dr. Peter Crane. I'm a physician in rural Idaho where I've been in practice since 2011. Over the past couple of years, I've had the opportunity to be both a physician and a patient, and I've been so thankful for the doctors and other healthcare professionals who have helped me. I invite you to join us as we highlight physicians around the world who are making a difference in their communities and with their patients. Our goal is to give physicians and other healthcare professionals the tools they need to be successful in medicine, in finances, and in life. What we do makes a tremendous difference for our patients and our communities. Please go to your podcast service or YouTube channel and give us a 5-star review and hit the like or subscribe button. It helps get the message out to others. You can also check out more content on our website, doctorsmakingadifference.com. Finally, if you would like to be on the show or have any questions or topics that you feel should be addressed on the show, please contact me. The easiest way to get in contact is to subscribe to the newsletter and then hit reply to any of the newsletter emails. Welcome to the Doctors Making a Difference podcast. Today on the podcast, we have my friend Dr. Jeff Bennion. I've had the privilege of working with Dr. Bennion for years, and he has achieved the wonderful milestone of being able to retire from full-time practice. And I'll let you take it away, Jeff, if you don't mind introducing yourself to our audience.
Yeah, my name is Dr. Jeff Bennion. I was or have been an otolaryngologist practicing in northern Utah and southeastern Idaho. Practice is based in Logan, Utah. Just finished, how many years now? 30 years. 30 and a half. We judge it because our son was a week old when we moved. I trained at University of Maryland in Baltimore. So I went from the Knife and Gun Club of inner city Baltimore with gunshots as a frequent patient type to people who were working hard and had farming accidents and hit in the face by a horse's head. So very, very different type of a practice than what I initially trained for. Lots of trauma and lots of head and neck cancer as well because of all the smoking and the drinking. And so I have practiced in Logan for 30 years, had wonderful partners, which is just a great blessing. Had a very sound practice financially, had a very sound practice clinically. Worked together closely for 30 years. I've had, really 4 major partners and one that just came in to replace me, and great relationships with them, still call them friends and have just the dearest feelings towards them. One of the great blessings of practicing medicine is the colleagues and working together. I have 4 sons. None of them went into medicine. I have 3 daughter-in-laws, and 2 of them are in medicine. One's
how interesting.
Resident in anesthesia at SLU in St. Louis, and the other is just in the process of applying for an orthopedic residency, and likely will be on the East Coast. One of the more major programs, it looks like. So still doing medicine. I've pretty much really have retired. I don't even carry malpractice now. Most of my medical work is in regards to some work in Tanzania, and then doing some really consulting with the practice that I've been a part of for 30 years.
Oh, it's wonderful. Like I said at the beginning, I've had the opportunity to work with you. We shared patients in a small community that you did outreach to for many years. How many years did you do outreach to smaller communities from
probably
Logan?
28 years. I always kind of felt like it was my responsibility to be involved either inner city or in rural medicine. So being up in a rural area, it was natural to go up to Preston, Idaho, and then by you in Montpelier, Idaho.
Yeah.
Very underserved areas.
Well, I remember you telling me that years ago when I first met you that, hey, I'm here because this is where it needs to happen, and we bring the medicine to the people because a lot of folks who find themselves in those rural areas are hardworking, amazing people. But it's a little bit harder to travel to get to a major medical center to get something done. And if you can bring that medicine to them, it really is quite a gift to those individuals who receive it.
Yeah, I figured it was better for me to travel for 2 hours than everybody to travel two down to see me.
Oh yeah. Well,
So,
my patients have
well,
loved working with you for years, and we miss you.
that's nice of you to say.
We miss you, and I know, Jeff's talking about retirement, but it just barely happened. This is hot off the press.
Yeah, I was practicing. My last case was exactly a month ago.
Yeah, no, I've talked to people who are like, "Oh yeah, I miss Dr. Bennion. He's gone." Like, well, he's got good partners. He's trained up. You'll be all right. But
Yeah,
we do miss
well,
that level of expertise and experience that you had gained over a course of an entire career.
that's nice of you to say.
We'll kind of go reflect back with me just a little bit. Part of some of the listeners on this podcast are medical students or early stage physicians that are in residency or early years. How did you decide on medicine, and how did you decide on ENT as a specialty? If you think back all those years ago.
So I grew up doing show and tell, ear, nose, and throat because my father's an ear, nose, and throat physician.
Oh, neat.
And so I was surrounded by it my entire life. My pets were guinea pigs because he was doing research back in Baltimore on guinea pigs. Guinea pigs have very similar ear structures to humans, and so we would get the cast off animals as pets. So I've been around it my whole life. As far as choosing medicine, I had other things I could have done, and you always wonder about an alternative life. You know, what would have happened if you'd have chose this or that. But I decided pretty early on that I wanted to do something that was involved with people and that blessed people's lives. And being a physician is one thing that you can do and still make a very good income. And I have to admit that that played into it. I did not want to, I wanted to have a secure situation for my family. I look, and I could have made much more money had I gone into business or into some other areas. I don't have any doubt about that. But none of them ever saved somebody's life. And there's a great deal of satisfaction, both, dealing with chronic problems and helping people in that regards, and also as a surgeon doing the acute interventions and the changes that that can have and the impact that can have as far as what could be life ending or life altering situations that you are able to prevent that from happening. So it's been a very fulfilling career, very fulfilling life. It's very difficult. I think everyone who's involved with medicine, if you don't pick that out early on, becomes very apparent in residency and as you get out. But it's also extremely fulfilling. And so I looked at the different career options and chose to go ahead and end up in medicine, despite seeing my father go through some of the hard times and difficulties that occur. And I'm glad I did.
Well, I've heard it. I've heard people say and read, at least at one era of time, it was called the greatest profession. I still think it is, and it sounds like you have reflected on some of those same themes, because it's one of the, if you're a young person trying to figure out how to support your family and how you can take care of yourself, it's one of the sure bets that people are always going to need health care. You'll have a skill set that can really help. So financially, it can set you up to be successful, but it's so unique. There's nobody that does what physicians do, and that's why they call it the greatest profession, because you're doing this tremendous good for people in the world on an individual level, and it affects them in a way that no other career could, because you have their hands on them or their loved ones, and you're fixing something that they couldn't fix on their own. And so I think it's pretty cool that you were able to choose that, and that you followed in your father's footsteps, even knowing what the life of a physician looked like.
Well, and it's like I said, it's been very fulfilling. And it really is true. There's very few things you can. I mean, there's a lot of wonderful things that people do. I mean, I look around and there's great things that people do for other people in the business world, in education. I mean, there's all kinds of ways you can help people. But as far as on a personal one-to-one level and intervening in people's lives, I agree with you. There's nothing like it. And as far as the relationships you're able to build with those that you're helping, plus also, once again, all the relationships you build with with your colleagues and the other healthcare professionals and the office staff. It's a very, very rewarding thing to do in your life.
Yeah. Well, and I wouldn't. People have asked me that as students that will come through, and they'll say, "Well, should I become a doctor? Or why would you do this?" And you probably tell people the same thing, like, "Don't do it unless you're passionate about it, and you find that
Oh yeah.
it's where you belong, and it's kind of your calling, because it'll eat you for lunch if you're not passionate about it, because it's not easy."
No, and like I said, I could have made far more money. I've told my kids that they'll make a lot more money than me. They're predominantly in the business world, and I really think they'll make more money than I ever did. But that's not the whole end all in life. I mean, we're very comfortable. I have been very blessed, but it's really nice to have been able to look back and see all the times I've been able to intervene. And I've been imperfect too. There's been a lot of growth that takes place. Being a physician sometimes is a little bit lonely and a little bit sad because not everything works out. And I'm certainly not perfect in every decision I've made. And those can be hard times. And yet it's still really fulfilling.
Well, and I think that's maybe one of the reasons why you have to be internally motivated to do it, and it is one of the reasons why people who are physicians earn more than some of the other jobs, because you have to be right there in that difficult spot and say, okay, I made a decision, and you might die as a result of my poor decision, even though I'm making the best decision possible with the circumstances at hand.
Yeah.
And those are hard, but I do think it is an incredible position that society has allowed us to be in to help people, and it's a really a unique career.
Yeah, I agree. I don't discourage nor do I encourage anybody. They have to really want to do it. When I started out, I'd been practicing about a week and a half, and a gal who just graduated from high school uh, looked at me and said, "So you just started?" He says, "So how long did it take you to get here?" And I looked at her and I said, "Look, when you started kindergarten, I started med school. You finished before I finished because she just graduated from hmy school.
It's totally
So
true.
it's a long time, but very well worth it. Hard. I mean, I like my wife is. It's hard on the spouses. It's hard on the kids, and it's important to recognize that and to be grateful for what they do go through as well. But it's worth it. And I like to think that they've had some of the blessings and joy as well.
Well, one of the things that I've noticed in recent years is there's a lot of motivation for people to leave medicine or say, look, it's too hard. Everybody's burnout. There's not a lot left here for the physician. And so I'm curious, from your perspective, how have you kept going? You did a full length career, and you retired at the top of your game, and you were able to retire with honor and dignity. And I'm just curious, what would you tell people who are behind you? How did you do that?
It is changing. I wish I could say it wasn't. I think there's some things that have are happening that are important in regards to paid call, in regards to some of the reimbursements. But I think the biggest key to it all is just to stay focused on the patient and do your best to ignore some of those outside influences that really tear and are the things I think that cause most of the stress and the so-called burnout. It's a real thing. I wish I could tell you it wasn't. I wish I could tell you I hadn't had periods where I felt burned out, where I was tired. I did a lot more than just as a physician. I mean, I was involved in building a hospital when I was in my early part of my career. I was involved in a lot of the governance and running of it over many years. I just finished building a 47,000 square foot office building a couple of years ago, which on that one I was pretty much the general manager. So I've done a lot of things outside of medicine as well that I found fulfilling that has helped. I've kept interest outside, and I think people do it in different ways. People bike, people uh, do photography. I travel a lot. I think you have to keep those outside interests as well. But you also have to take time out for yourself and take time away. I finally had to literally move on weekends because I would work on weekends. Uh, and so literally on weekends, I would leave completely. I would just remove myself from patient care and if I wasn't on call. And that was helpful too. Most people can do that on their own. I'm a little too compulsive, so I would see people on weekends, sometimes working 6 or 7 days a week. And you have to take time out. You just have to.
Well, I've found that same thing for me sometimes. If I'm here, it's like, well, how do you say no when the person you know their story better than anybody else because you've been
Yeah.
involved in it, but it can take every moment of your life if you're not careful. So I'm glad you were able to find ways to travel and then some of the outside interests with building a business. That's a really interesting side avenue I want to explore with you a little bit. But any other advice on how you would avoid the whole burnout thing? Because I feel like that I hear that term every day, and I'm curious what other life advice you'd give people on that.
I don't know if I'm the one to talk to about it. I do think that a lot of it, I don't think much of it comes from patient care. I think most of it comes from the administrative side. The demands put on us as far as record keeping, as far as governance, people interfering with what we're doing, having to deal with insurance companies. I know some colleagues. I have people I work with that are in other countries. It's a little bit different there. They don't get necessarily all the support that they need. So in some ways, it makes their life simpler. They don't, there's a lot of things that we do in our country for healthcare that are extremely beneficial. They don't even have access to. But on the other hand, it simplifies their life. And I don't think that's a smart thing to do either. I think that it's important that people don't sacrifice on keeping cutting edge and keeping on top of things intellectually and knowledge and in regards to knowledge. You've got to study, you've got to look things up, you've got to do the best for your patient. So it's a tough balancing act when you have people pulling at you like we do as physicians. But it's important, I think, to avoid the burnout, that you stay on top of things and that you take time away from what you're doing.
Well, I think that's that's good insight because not only have you pointed out that we need to focus on the interaction with the patient and that that relationship keeps you coming, but also having some time away. But I haven't really thought about that before as a way to sort of counteract burnout, as staying on top of your game. And it's a job that you have to keep learning or you fall behind pretty quick because the technology and the research changes rapidly. I haven't really thought about that. That's a really good point.
Well, the thing is that it makes decision making quick and fast. I mean, we're essentially gigantic algorithm machines. I mean, I hate to say it like that. People would disagree, but it's really true that we in our minds we go point to point as we interact with patients based on what they tell us, and then what we do is in an exam. And I think one of the key things that is important to avoid burnout is to go through those processes we learned in medical school. You go and you take the history and you listen to the patient. You observe when you're watching the patient. You pick up a tremendous amount of information, and then you go and you do your exam and you look and discover whatever is there physically, and then hopefully you've got algorithms. You don't have to fret and worry about what you're going to do and what you need to do and what's appropriate to do. And sometimes you do get things. I mean, we don't, all of us know everything. I certainly don't, even close to it. But that's where colleagues come in and resources and reaching out to people on some of those difficult cases. But most of the things are routine. And so if you learn how to proceed based on current information, you don't have to fret, you don't have to worry, and it takes a lot of the stress out of dealing with patients.
That's a really good insight. I like that idea that the more on top of your game you are, the more research and the more understanding you are on being up to date on stuff, the more it may help you to feel like you're still in the game, and then give you that quickness of decision making and not fret and worry. I know that as I've been in a few years, I find that I don't worry as much about second guessing my decisions as I did early on. And I think that
Right.
is probably most people experience that over a career. At the same time, you don't want to stagnate. It's kind of a balancing act.
No, it is. It's really important to change. I look at what I do now, meaning, case wise and everything, as well as decision makings and skill levels. And I don't do anything almost the same as I did 30 years ago. The knowledge has changed so much. I mean, that's what people have asked me, what are you going to miss? And what I'm going to miss is it's a tremendously cool time in medicine. I mean, the amount of knowledge that's being pushed forward. I know everyone hates big pharma, but man, the products are cool. All the biologics that are coming out, they're totally life changing. The testing that we're able to do now, an expansion of understanding of multiple disease processes, and still we're stupid, but we have so much to learn. But that's what I'm going to miss the most. It's like I want to see what it's all going to happen. There's cool stuff going on.
That's
It's an
true.
amazing time to practice.
It's true. Like it's like this information tsunami. I mean, you can't possibly read enough
Uh,
to keep up with everything that's coming, and it's not just in our country. Worldwide, there's just so many things that
well,
are innovations and furthering our understanding.
it's true. And one of the hard things too is that we're getting a lot of corollary information, correlations, and not actual research. And that's on the other side, the frustration. It's very easy now to put data points into the machine and say, this is related to this. Well, no, it really isn't. Not necessarily. You don't know that until you do the actual studies. And so it's also one of the challenges in medicine is trying to figure out what's a correlation and what is actually real. And so it's fun to watch medicine as what used to be considered relative dogma changes as good research is done. I'm not the correlations are bad, but it's important to understand that. I mean, I've looked at so many times I've looked at stuff and said, "Oh, that's crap." You know, it just isn't. It isn't going to prove to be real, and eventually that is proven true. But there are times that you get a surprise, and so it's a fun thing also to wear skeptics hat a little bit in medicine and not necessarily accept everything. And there's a challenge to all that information and choosing what's real and what's not. And frankly, foreign studies are much more often corollary or correlations because they have the government data points, and yet it's not necessarily factual. I think the one that comes to mind is colonoscopy, where some of the studies seem to show that guaiac tests were as efficient and effective as doing colonoscopy. Well, that's because in a lot of countries, colonoscopy is done poorly. And so if you look at poorly done colonoscopy, then yeah, guaiac test is about as effective as a badly done
Right.
colon. But if you go in the United States where the people are extremely good at it, whether it be someone like you who's family practice or the GI doctors, the correlation, it saves lives. It just does. And so you can't always swallow everything that you read and hear. And that's another fun thing about medicine. And something else that happens when you've been practicing 30 years. You see things come and go, and you get a feel for the fact that some things deserve skepticism.
No, it makes sense. The point you just made. I know you're an ENT doc. We're talking about colonoscopies, but I preach that on a daily basis. I say, look, you're welcome to do guaiac or immunohistochemical testing on the stool, but there's nothing like a fully visualized colon and the polyps that are removed. You're removing that polyp; it's gone, and
Right.
you're not just taking corollary information or peripheral information or biomarkers that might be correlated. You're actually seeing the disease process and removing it. And I just had the misfortune of diagnosing one of my younger patients with colon cancer this
Dude.
week, and it's just kind of crushed me. But because that's the hard part about small town medicine. You end up diagnosing
Right.
your friends with things. But I but with that in mind, as we do those tests like that, it makes a tremendous difference to actually find the polyp and remove it. And there's nothing quite like that. And so I'm glad that you brought that up from a research standpoint.
Yeah, and there's many things like that. So that's why medicine, to me, is fun. And I think if you want to avoid burnout, that keeping it fun is an important part of it. You've got to find areas of enjoyment. And I mean, I get angry sometimes at all the intrusions into patient care that we deal with, and that may be not healthy either. I mean, I get a temper sometimes about it, but I think the medicine part of it is such a blast. It's just enjoyable, and the learning part of it's a big part of that, and the challenge of finding patients. And nobody reads the textbooks in an office. The patients come in and they have their unique symptoms and unique manifestations, and you get some people who just fall by the line, but there's so many people who don't. And so it's fun to look and do the research to figure things out, to include some colleagues and some specialists, and try to help people, because some are pretty desperate.
Oh yeah.
And you can make such a difference in people's lives.
I tell people all the time, well, here's what the research shows, but nobody ever studied you because
Yeah,
they're unique. Everybody's so unique. That is what keeps us coming back, is the unique, interesting patients that come
right.
into our offices day after, or our ORs day after day. Well,
Yeah, and I've learned a tremendous amount from my referring doctors as I send people out to see them. There's just so much to learn and so much to gain. And like I said, we're here to bless people's lives, and there's very few jobs that are like that, where that's pretty much the sole point is to really help people and elevate people, and not just in their disease state, but also emotionally and as a sense of person. I mean, I think it is so helpful to have somebody, and I hope physicians, if they are listening to me, you know, we're a well-respected entity in general. And if somebody walks in your office, it's interesting. They may yell and scream at my office staff if I'm late, but they will always be respectful to me. They don't get angry. They just don't. And I feel bad that my staff takes the brunt of it. And because of that, I've always got the feeling that if I treated somebody as an equal, and if I went and tried to impart respect to them as well as a patient, that it goes far beyond what it would for most people. I think that's an important thing that we can do for our patients, is to show them, a deep sense of respect as forever for whoever they are. And it's interesting, you get somebody in and they have teardrop tattoos, they've had a rough life, they've done drugs, they've done all kinds of stuff that I would never consider. But it's still important to treat people with respect like that, because we're such a respected entity. It means so much more to those individuals. I've been surprised at the outpouring that I've had as I've retired and as people have made comments that that's something I didn't necessarily appreciate until I read the comments.
that's so kind of people to do it, and it does make sense when people come to a doctor. I have to remember that they're putting themselves in a place that's vulnerable. You say, I'm giving all my information to this person, and when you treat them like a person back, just like you're a friend or a neighbor, like the advice you would give to a family member, I think they really respect it. And I told you, Jeff, my health battle over the last couple of years with that big
Right.
tumor, and I've shared that pretty broadly on this podcast. But I think about that experience of being a patient and needing something to save my life, and so thankful for the people that took the time and had the experience to help me in that hour of need. And I suppose the hour will come for all of us where we'll have some kind of a big
Yeah.
health thing, and when your turn comes, you're really thankful to have a physician who has experience and knowledge and compassion and all the things you just described.
Yeah. It's such an important part of what we do. Not just heal the disease, but heal the person.
Hmm. Do you have any experiences? I mean, as you think back over the years, I mean, we have to be HIPAA compliant, but are there any patient experiences that you would share, any stories of ones that really stood out in your
Uh,
mind?
What do you want to hear about? I can tell you anything from the gruesome to the. We talked a little bit about the Knife and Gun Club back in Baltimore. One of the most interesting things I had happen was really one of the very first weeks I was on call as a new doctor. And so I'd been involved in the, inner city and, homelessness and a lot of people out of work and just that they struggle with life. And I get up to Logan, and one of the very first things I had a gentleman who was in his 80s who was out on a thrasher, and it was an old implement, had a sharp spike on it. As he got out of the cab, he slipped and he impaled himself in a sternocleidomastoid,
Hmm.
and was hanging from a sternocleidomastoid. And so as he yelled and screamed, and they came over and kind of lifted him up off of the thing, put some pressure on his neck, and brought him to the emergency room. And he had a little small tear in the jugular. It wasn't anything that was horrendous and could easily be oversewn, actually, and packed some tissue around it. So not any kind of a major bleed or major issue. The thing that was interesting is that I get to work on Monday, and my office manager says, "Hey, I heard you did da 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 for da 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 da." And I said, "Yeah, how's he doing? Is he up out of bed?" And she said, "Out of bed? He's out thrashing again this morning. What are you talking about?"
Of course he was.
And and then she said, "And the funny thing is he's just a hobby farmer. He's a multimillionaire. He doesn't need to do it at all."
Oh my
So here
goodness.
I had this 82-year-old guy who impales himself on a thrasher. 2 days later is back thrashing and is a multimillionaire and doing it for the fun of it. And so I was like, okay, I am not in Baltimore anymore. This is a different life.
Oh my goodness. That is wild. Did you ever see him in follow up?
Oh yeah, and he did great. He did great. I'm surprised he didn't rip the stitches out driving because you put a little torque on your neck when you're driving, but everything just healed beautifully and he did well.
Oh,
But there's a hardiness that we get around our neighborhood with all the cold weather and the farmers and the agricultural aspects are such a to me, I'm a city kid. I had no idea about it. When they'd say something, I'd like, what are you talking about? It was a total foreign language, but such richness with the people there. We're very fortunate to have associated with with those farmers and ranchers and all those people. No, yeah, like I said, it depends what you want to hear. I have all kinds of stories.
I can think of so many stories like that where someone in their 80s they need a hip replacement or they need whatever procedure or they need a medication or whatever it may be, and the everything hinges on that question: when can I get back to my on my horse? When can
Yeah.
I ride my tractor? And it's interesting because as soon as they're done, they're back doing it. They're not on pain medicine.
Oh yeah.
They're not interested. And they'll come and follow up with me one time if I beg and plead just to make sure that everything's healed okay. But outside of that, they're not interested. They just have got a life to live, and
It's it's true. I'm far more concerned about them than they are.
that's
They
true.
just go. They just go. No, I mean, you can't get through medicine. That's the thing. You can't get through medicine without meeting characters and fun people. And I had one guy who was gritching at me and just upset that I wasn't able to get him feeling better. But he had a chronic problem, and sometimes there's chronic problems that you can't help.
Right.
And he owned a store, and I said, I've been in your store a lot of times, dude. And he looked at me and he said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Yeah, I've been in your store, and I've yet to find a magic wand. That's what you need. If you want to get better, you need to get me a magic wand, and I can get you better." And he looked at me, and then he started laughing. He said, "Okay, Doc, I get it." But there are times you can't help people. It's like, you know what? You got arthritis. There's not anything I can do about it. I can give you some medicine. Here you go. I can't cure you. There's just things that we do. But I've always loved it. If you had in your store, if you sold magic wands, I could help you. And he was kind of a ornery type individual, and it calmed him right down. It was there's times a little bit of humor I think is important in medicine.
Well, yeah.
The the I think some of the so there's some young people, younger docs. I think one of the things that does happen, um, my training is a lot different when I look at my daughter-in-laws and what they'll go through. I mean, I trained in the old school. I mean, I was doing every other night, full other night. So you would be at the hospital for 36, 38 hours, and then you'd go home for a few hours, and then you'd be back at 7 the next morning. And so there's a hardness that develops with that, a toughness. And one of the things, the advantages to that, although there's I'm sure disadvantages, is you saw a lot of cases, but you also learned how to function tired. And I know you're not supposed to be tired ever, but that happens. And so it's important that you learn to do the right things when you're tired or fatigued, or you're not feeling good. It's really, really important that you do the right things. And I say that because there's times where it's really tempting, for instance, not to get out of bed, to say, "Oh, just deal with it, nurse." And 80% of the time you might be fine, but there's 20% of the time when it's not going to be fine, and your eyes are needed. And I can't tell you how many times, by getting up out of bed and going and doing the right thing, it really myself problems in the future as far as malpractice, but also really help patients. And so one of the things that also goes back to that burnout or fatigue is having the habits where you go do the hard thing. You get up out of bed, you go see the person, you answer that phone call. It's everybody, if looking from the outside, says, "Of course you'll go in," but you can get pretty tired sometimes. And it gets really easy to rationalize. And it's important to go ahead and do the hard things anyway. And that's one of the things that came out of that kind of training, where we just got slammed. And I sometimes don't see that in some of the younger people. And I read that other physicians like myself have that same critique, that they're unwilling to go in and see patients, because it's not convenient. They're tired. They have other things to do. They don't want to do it. But somebody's got to deal with the problems. Otherwise, people get hurt.
Yeah, well, one of the challenges I think, just in medicine in general, I think people don't want to sacrifice all the other parts of their lives. But one of the solutions that, like you already hinted at, that I think helps the most is if you have colleagues that you can trust, and if you work as a part of a collegial team. And
Right.
like I mean, you've worked with the docs in the town where I've worked, and that's one of the things I really enjoyed is I had a practice partner for years, and he moved on, as you know, to another town, but he and I had such a good relationship. I knew that if I was out of town, he would do exactly that. He would show up in the middle of the night or whenever,
Right.
and he knew I would do the same, because we were committed to those patients. And so the only way to find some balance is to say, okay, when I'm gone, I fully turn it over to you, but that's because I trust you. And we had built up a rapport and a relationship over years, that when I left town and I left it in his stewardship, it was going to be done well. And I knew that I knew I wasn't leaving somebody to just, to be treated by somebody that didn't know what they were doing.
Right.
And so I sounded, and you kind of talked about the same. You had these trusted colleagues, and I'm
Oh,
sure
yeah.
that's really how you do it.
I mean, there's no other way. There's just no other way. And it makes for some long nights and some hard nights when you're taking care of somebody else's patients. But it's so worth it to, once again, to do the right thing. And then you'll have your free time and you'll have your time off. But yeah, that's such an important thing.
Yeah, well, and it's worth cultivating both the experience to take care of patients and the relationships. You don't want to be the lone wolf that doesn't talk to anybody and won't let anybody
Uh,
help, because after a while that doesn't pay you back. The only person that benefits is the patient right then and there, but you don't have anything left to give because you're fried. And so it is
right.
helpful to have those colleagues. and you hope that people have done both the same level of training and have the same level of commitment. And I found that most of my peers that show up have had that, and it's really actually wonderful when you have people that are that committed to the outcome on our patients.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I've been, I wouldn't say surprised, but just, gratified. I look at it, I kind of get a little upset. It's like you're entrusting medicine to businessmen, and physicians are some of the best guys I know. What are
Yeah.
you doing?
Well, we got
You
to be
know?
careful. How did let's talk about that for a minute. You started some businesses along the way, and you're certainly busy in your clinical practice, and you mentioned that helps with the burnout, but it was both interesting and fulfilling. And I'm curious how you found that intersection between starting,
Well,
maintaining businesses, and then
we
clinical practice.
we tried hard to fight some of the changes that were taking place in regards to the corporatization of medicine. And so, as part of that, we decided as a group down in Cache Valley to build a hospital. That whole push started shortly after I got to Cache Valley, a couple of years after, in reaction to the hospital simply not putting money back into the community. They have since, but at that time, they just were not investing in the community. They were taking tremendous amounts of money out of it. And we got frustrated not having equipment, not having things the way we needed to. And so we banded together and built a hospital. Um, and so that's something that's difficult to do now. They've just made it very, very hard to do as physicians. It happens, but it's not common. I think now much more common is for people to build outpatient surgery centers or procedure centers, and those have been very, very, I think, important for medicine to have that kind of involvement from physician input. But nevertheless, it opened my eyes as far as the fact that to be functioning well as a physician, you have to have financial health too. That you need to make sure that practices are well run, that there's a level of expertise in how you do things, and it taught me to really trust the business side of things. So with that, and since then, I've just developed relationships with business people, and have done what physicians tend not to do, which is realize that there are other people who are super smart. I'm not the smartest guy in the room. I'm maybe as smart as, but I've developed a high level of trust for some individuals that are outside of medicine, and because of that, have become involved in some different projects and some building projects and I don't know, just some. We did a research company, which we decided to fold because it wasn't worth the headaches and hassles. Although it was fun and got my name on a bunch of papers,
Mm-hmm.
but the one lesson that I did learn from doing the hospital was I did learn to trust people who are not in medicine, and I learned to listen to them. And because of that, it's just has opened opportunities for me in regards to being involved with some developments and it's profitable.
Oh
I
yeah.
mean,
Well,
money to be made.
business is where you make money for sure. But what would
But
you tell someone like now if you were coming out of residency, or if you're, in the early stages of practice and saying, okay, maybe I want to go into business for myself, or I want to be part of a
hey,
surgery center. What would you tell someone? You've done this extensively.
oh, jump in. Businesses are where money's made. What we do doesn't make that much. I mean, we're part of a business. I mean, the thing is that what you want to make money when you're on vacation. We're the product, and it makes it hard. Our services are the product that we get paid for, and it's nice to have some other things that make money when I'm not doing anything that are, they call it passive income, but nevertheless money that you make when you don't do it. And to do that, most of us don't have that expertise, and so you have to join up with other people who do have the expertise. A lot of times, for me, initially at least, I was a money source among many, and just an investor. And then as I learned more about the business, took more initiative and more involvement and became more of a trusted advisor for my insights. But it started out by having money and finding people to trust and then being involved with them. There's a lot of times I spoke with one of the an ex-university chairman of the business department. I won't say which one. And we were talking, and I was asking him some questions about charity work. He's involved with some microloan organizations, and he said, "You know what MD stands for, don't you? It stands for money dumb."
Money
He
dump.
said, "Money dumb,
Oh, money
not dumb,
dumb, not
money
D-U-M-P,
dumb,
D-U-M-B.
DOB." And it's because physicians as a whole, we like to think we're the smartest guys around. And we are to a great degree. I mean, our IQs are great, but very smart people learn a lot of things about business. And so the thing that I've learned mainly is to develop trust for people and to take advice and to listen, not necessarily to just blindly follow. I've seen that happen as well, and some people have done some really dumb things. But make sound decisions, be skeptical, nevertheless, listen to what other people say and get involved in other people. And there's a lot of opportunities if you do that. There's a lot of opportunities out there. People are looking for individuals who are willing to listen to their advice, learn from them, and then also add their expertise and their understanding. So it's over the years been fairly profitable. And I did go out and with some other colleagues, we went and we needed office space, so we built a building. And I did a lot of work on that as well. And that was an education as well. I don't know if I'd ever want to do that
It's
again.
a big project.
It's a big project. It was very taxing. But nevertheless, I learned a tremendous amount about building and the process and financing and the insides of a building, which you don't think about. I learned how to read blueprints, and so it's fun. Learning's
Well,
always fun.
oh yeah. Well, and you hit on that concept of financial independence, where your income is not just dependent on how many hours you work, or you can make money while you sleep, so
Yeah.
to speak. And I think, like you say, money dumb. I told my parents MD stood for major disappointment. MD
Oh,
stands for lots of things, but I think that that's probably a good thing that we should probably remember for ourselves is, you do have a skill set that's marketable, and it's been really popular over the last 20 years to go work for somebody as soon as you end up out of residency. And
right.
but there's still a really wonderful skill set to learn how to take care of patients. And if we could gain a little bit of business acumen and work with people, like you said, if you can find trusted colleagues, what you have to offer is still tremendous. And I thought that was interesting. You pointed out that they turned to you for advice, not just from the medical side, but also kind of on the business side, as you gained a little bit more experience having done that a few times.
Well, we're as a group, not necessarily individual, we're extremely good at learning and grabbing facts and then making hard decisions, which is really what business is. And so as you gain that understanding and look and are able to look at things, a lot of times I'm a little pessimistic. I don't pick some winners, but I've done pretty well in regards to what we've been able to choose and do, and it's been a nice thing to not have to. It's been a nice thing to augment financially with some good investments.
Well, I like what you said earlier. If you have an opportunity and you come across something when the opportunity presents, don't shy away from it, as long as it makes good financial sense. So
Right.
I think that's cool.
Well, and I've seen physicians taken to the cleaners multiple times. I you don't make money from nothing. You don't make huge returns. You don't get 28% guaranteed anything. If people are offering and it sounds too good to be true, it is, get away from your Simon, walk away, talk to somebody, That happens all the time. I've seen people taken. I can't tell you how many times I've seen people taken and tried to talk people out of things sometimes, and they just won't listen because there's such an excitement. It's easy to get sold, but good investment, individuals that are good to associate with are people who have a track record. They've been honest. Honesty is such a huge part of it, is finding people who are straightforward with you, and you also, at least, you don't want to be around people who panic in a business. You want people who stay calm, don't sell early. I mean, there's all kinds of things that will lead you to people who have sound judgment and will make good decisions.
Well, and there's no real get rich quick strategy. You can get rich
No,
slow, invest slowly, and do it piece by piece, and build the building blocks, and then it'll pay you back years later.
right,
We've
right.
talked on this podcast before about just the time value of money. If you slowly invest and you put it in vehicles that will grow, whether it's business or broadly diversified stock index funds or whatever it may be, if you just are patient and you slowly work on those, it'll come back, and you'll achieve kind of what you've described, Jeff. You get this financial independence thing where your money is making money, and then what you're doing is taking care of patients, but not because you're so financially in trouble. You do it because you're passionate about patient care, which is pretty neat.
Well, and it takes a lot of pressure off. There's a pressure to make money if you have huge debts. And one of the things we've commented on, my partners and I, is that we've been very, very blessed with wives who don't want to spend money.
That is a
And
blessing.
that sounds funny, but it takes the pressure off. We can all of a sudden quit spending. You buy food and you keep it to the simple things. And if you do that for 6 months, and then you can use the money for other things, and either go on a trip or whatever. But it's been, all of us have always, all my partners have these wonderful, just unbelievable wives who have not put pressure on them to make a lot of money. So there's a partnership there that becomes very important with the family. If you're pressed to always spend your money and buy the biggest and the best, and always are pushed financially to make a lot of money to feed your consumption, you're going to get in trouble, and it's going to put pressure on you medically, and potentially with a conflict of interest where you're pushed to make money, and it may cloud how you practice and what you do. And so, at least for me, I've been really fortunate, not only for myself, but with my partners. We have never had that kind of pressure. We've always been able to do what we needed or wanted to do. And if we had periods of time where, we had a period where Blue Cross quit paying us for 3 months. And it was like, oh, well, we just, we don't get paid. We're okay. We've saved money. We've got money in the bank. We're fine. We can wait that 3 months. And there wasn't some pressure to come up with money or go take out a loan or do anything that would jeopardize us in the future. And so there's a real blessing to simplicity, to having a house that isn't the biggest house, having a car that isn't the nicest car. Um, I know that may not be popular with some people, but at least for us, it's really worked well with both myself and all my partners. We don't drive the newest cars, but it's helped us financially and it's helped us medically.
Yeah, this is such good advice though. Like it's not just what somebody read online or heard on TikTok. We're listening to someone who has actually done this, and you and your partners have just had a sound track record of being successful for years. And I really appreciate you sharing those little tips along the way. There, it's not the big things; it's the little things that add up to really make the difference.
Yeah, that's a huge thing for us that we comment on not infrequently, how blessed we are to not get pulled on by our consumption desires. And Chase Peterson, he was the dean of medical school for a while, and then was the president of University of Utah. He came and talked to us and gave that advice when I was in med school. You can always consume. It doesn't matter how much you make. I mean, MC Hammer went bankrupt, and
Good
he
point.
made hundreds of millions of dollars. You can always spend money. The goal is to make sure that you keep your consumptions under control, and that you spend less than you make, and that you save. And in the long run, you'll have far more than you ever would have if you spent it. And we did that. If you want a story, we went out, and the very first thing we did was like, hey, we got to buy some bunk beds for our kids. We got to go get them some furniture. They've been living in, IKEA was brand new back then. It was like, the nicest thing we have is an IKEA changing table. And so we went out
Right.
to buy furniture. And then we kind of looked at the price tag and we realized it's like, I guess we really don't need that. And we took them back. And and that kind of set a stage where I can't show you my house right now because we just literally are just moving in. But over the years, we've been able to buy nice things and have nice things. We haven't shortchanged ourselves at all, but we have put ourselves in a situation where I'm retired in Hilton Head, South Carolina. You know,
It's
I
awesome.
never would
No,
have thought, I never would have thought that. I never, when I started, would have thought that.
well, it's a blessing, and I really appreciate those insights. I want to ask you a little bit about your work in Africa. Just in our last little bit here, I know you and I visited about that a while ago, and you mentioned that you're taking both your business knowledge and your medical knowledge and trying to improve the lives of people who have just almost nothing at their disposal as far as resources. And I'd like to hear what's driving you on that and what's your
So,
work on that.
it's got to be about 8 or 9 years ago, I heard a talk by a gal by the name of Gail Woodson, who was chairman at Southern Illinois in otolaryngology, and she talked about being in Tanzania. I'd served an LDS mission in South Africa and was heavily involved. Back in apartheid, I'd go into Soweto, and I never saw another white the entire time I was there. I worked in some emergency rooms in Cape Town that were just let's just say I developed an affinity for the African culture and a great respect for it. And so she was talking about work she was doing in Tanzania where they were taking medical students and had engaged those medical students after interviews and essentially put them through ENT training. And then eventually, just recently, they've all finished fellowship training in different fellowships. And the goal and intent was to develop a training program. What often happens in foreign countries that are financially stressed in healthcare is that people will go overseas to train, but then they never go back. There's just no incentive to go back. And so Dr. Woodson and her husband, Tom Robbins, um, developed intellectually a prototype where they decided to go in and train people there. And so they got colleagues from all over Europe and in the United States to come in and essentially train these people to the point that they were, you know, trained just like somebody here in the United States. And then they went and did fellowship training. Now they've all come back and set up a training program for otolaryngology residents at Kilimanjaro Christian Medical School. And so what we're trying to do right now is to solidify that, expand the training, expand the education, because right now the facilities are 1960s
Mm.
and it's 2024. And so right now what we're trying to do is raise money and build facilities. The first thing that is going in uh, is some improvements so we can bring more faculty over. They've engaged some people. I won't give names or places, but they've engaged some other professors from across the United States, hoping to go over there. So right now we're working on a place for them to come stay for a month or 6 weeks so they can instruct and teach. And then we're also trying to raise money to develop a surgery skills center for both ear, nose, and throat, orthopedics, general surgery, and some other facilities. Plus, we're trying to develop some improved clinic space and patient care space.
Wow. Well,
So,
it's so cool because, we've kind of this whole this whole discussion, I kind of feel like is full circle with this piece of it, because you have lived and gained this skill set, and because you've lived in a way that you're financially responsible, you can give in a way that nobody else could. Or you're able to say, look, I can use this skill not only just from giving my dollars, but I can go over there and give my expertise from the medical side and the business side, so that we can bless the lives of those who people who couldn't do it on their own. But if you give them a leg up, they'll pull themselves out of the poverty cycle, and it's amazing work.
Well, it's been these are great docs. I mean, I would let them operate on me. I mean, I these are some really outstanding individuals that are over in Tanzania, and we're just trying to get them support so that they can sustain it and so that they can use their skills. I mean, it's really one of the frustrating things is they have all these skills and they don't have the equipment or the capabilities of using those skills because they don't have what they need. And so that's really what the bottom line is right now, is we're trying to raise money to buy, for instance, some of the pediatric airway equipment that is needed, and some of the skull-based surgery equipment that's needed. And there's a whole array of things that the people have trained to do that they can't do because they just don't have what's needed. And so that's really what we're trying to do. So when the Gail and Tom started, there were 9 otolaryngologists in all of Tanzania, which is 56 million people. And now they've trained a group of 6 who are now professors or professorial. I don't know in Tanzania if they're truly professors, but they're medicine educators. And then they'll be finishing and at least starting some fellowship training where they will do fellowship teaching and start fellowship programs, as well as doing residency program at otolaryngology. The otolaryngology program started 3 years ago. So the first group will just be finishing up about next year.
Yeah, it's so cool.
It's pretty cool.
I mean, and you have this background of being in South Africa, and you had an opportunity to present in Tanzania, and I know I've done some work in Africa as well, and it's so fulfilling because it's not just giving stuff to people; it's giving somebody a skill set that allows them to pull themselves out of the poverty cycle, and then once they're given that, they're perfectly intelligent, wonderful folks, just like anybody else you would be. Yeah. They're wonderful, and they'll pull themselves out of the poverty cycle just like we would. And I sometimes it's out of sight, out of mind. But if you go there and you interact with those folks and you find what they actually need, it's amazing. And I think that could be applied to any country in the world. If you take that skill set and you give them a few resources, they'll just run with it. People are amazing.
Yeah, it's a wonderful people. And I was in South Africa doing apartheid, and so these were blacks who did not have opportunity. They just did not. They was completely shut off from opportunity. And that's what I saw back then as I became friends with those that were living in the township. They just needed opportunity. And the same is true in Tanzania and the rest of Africa. Very bright, smart people who just do not have the infrastructure and are living with so much corruption around them that it's hard to get a foot in the door and start declining. Yeah. And so it's been very engaging, and it does help. My business side does really help. I mean, it's like starting a business. I've done I don't know how many businesses I've or how many times I've visited the attorney and come up with a name to name something or whatever. I mean, plus something as simple as accounts receivable and billing cycles and how to set up the way an office runs. It's not something that's common over there. And so the practice experience that both you and I have is for them, extremely valuable. Something as simple that it's easy to take for granted, but for them, they get paid by the government and they're not used to the practice model, basic practice model. So wow. There's all kinds of ways you can help.
Well, it's fascinating. I appreciate you taking the minute to share that. I know as our time draws close here, I just have loved it, and I think people will really honor this episode as we talk about a life well lived and a practice where you've been able to live in a way that you can give back to people. And even in the retirement years, it sounds like you're just starting a new project, so it's not much of a retirement, but you
Oh,
were
it's
able to.
retirement. It's retirement. We're still putting our lives back together, but no, it's retirement. It's a lot different.
Yeah, well,
It's nice.
I'm very excited for you. Do you have
Thank you.
any final thoughts or any other advice you'd want to impart in this last little bit here before we close?
No, I don't know. For those who are starting out, it's hard, it's tough, and it's worth it. That's all I would say. And my partners would say the same thing. I have one who's 7 years behind me and one who has been practicing for 5 years. And we have fun. We enjoy it. And I think it's important that you don't let the outside things take that away. Medicine should be enjoyable. My father enjoyed it. It's that interaction with people, being able to bless people's lives, the intellectual challenges, and the fact, like I said at the beginning, it's one of the few things you can do and make some good money. Um, it makes it nice. But like I said, I've never done what I did for money. Money just comes.
Yeah.
It just comes.
Well, and
The
it's
taking care
awesome.
of patients, taking care of patients. If you just do that, everything else will take care of itself. As long as you pay attention to it, you can't ignore it. Take too much salary or whatever. But as long as you keep patients as the focus, people will come see you.
Well, I heard a statement once that said if you do a really good job and take good care of people and treat them right, they'll give you lots of pictures of George Washington to say thank you. And so
Oh yeah,
it works
they
out
do.
like that. It's kind of a win-win.
Yeah, it is.
Well, thank you so much, Jeff. I've
You
loved this
betcha.
interview, and I appreciate you taking the time to do it. And I look forward to talking to you down the road here.
Oh, you betcha. My pleasure. And thanks for including me. I appreciate
Of
that.
course. Thank you. Bye.
You bet. Take care. Bye bye.
Thanks.